Folks, we're in for a treat. This is my friend Ted Braude, author and legendary mentor working in boys' work for a long time. Ted Braude is the founder of the Boys' Work Project, an integral psychologist, a licensed master social worker, and an expert on boys, an author, therapist, mentor, martial artist, musician, and a writer. He brings boys into young manhood, helping them develop into the men they are born to become. The Boys' Work Project develops a community of caring adults, creating a cultural path for boys to develop true to their nature from childhood to manhood. Sound familiar, folks? This guy's been a great mentor to us. To live as strong, sensitive, playful boys, free of the boy code, to be mentored and initiated as young men who are purposeful, passionate, productive, powerful, by a community of men, and welcomed and validated by women and men together. Ted has been a supporter of Boys to Men, has come to trainings. I know San Diego, I don't know if he's gone anywhere else, on his own dime to support and help us grow our program. It's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Ted Braude. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you all. Joe, it's so great to hear you and see you, and I'm so glad to do this with you and for you. I can't tell you how happy I am to do it. So I don't need to say anything about me because you said enough. I want to give all of you what developed as my understanding of what I refer to as youth, usually referred to as adolescent boys, which is, it's really what the boys taught me over pretty close to 40 years of working with them and 25 years of the Boys Work Project. So this is not something you're going to find in some psychology book or anywhere, right out of the street with the guys. So the first thing I want you to know is they're bored. The youth, yes, in spite of, I want to say, but along with everything else that's going on, it is hard to describe some of this under the current condition of the poverty and the pandemic and the divisive. Nonetheless, I continue to see this, and it's important to speak to it because so many of these qualities, they just go unnoticed, and they are essential in terms of the passageway from boys into young manhood and from young manhood into manhood. So they're bored. And I'm going to focus on really two ways that this shows up. The first one has to do with schooling, and it may be even excessively more so now with so many of the boys having to do screen time schooling because they're even less limited to being able to move around and live out of their bodies than they were able to do when they were in a classroom. And the boredom works pretty much this way, that the activity of school, I'm not talking about the content in the classrooms, the activity, what they're physically doing, by and large, up until the pandemic, has not changed. So by the time a boy hits 12, 13, absolutely by 14, he is developmentally ready for something new and different to happen. We don't even begin to give enough credit to how the youth, the boys, how much intelligence and knowledge and skill they've acquired by the time they're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And they're ready to be using that knowledge and skill, and they're ready to go on to more and different things. When that's not happening, they get really bored. The second area has to do with their families, because they've been in their families more or less. I say more or less depending on what kinds of blends and changes are going on. But they've been in their families long enough, and they're astute enough because they're just good human beings to understand the dynamics of the other people, the characteristics, the personalities of other people. In fact, even beyond that, they're able to understand clearly what's going on inside the other people, particularly the grown-ups, without anyone even having to give voice to that. And essentially, again, by the time they're 12, 13, 14 years old, they've got it all down. And they're ready to be learning something different, to be engaged differently. And when that doesn't happen, they get bored. I don't know about all of you who are on the other end of the screen with me. Boredom isn't really much fun. You tend to get real restless. And for the boys, they don't like being restless. They don't like being boy. So they tend to create some kind of heat, either in moving out from their body being or withdrawing in, or some combination between the two. Second quality that they've taught me, which you will almost never hear a boy say, the boys are afraid. They're afraid in many ways, but there's only 2 or 3 things I want to refer to because we just have a little bit of time. They are very afraid to grow up and become men. They are very afraid to grow up and become men. For years, they've been voicing to me, firstly, they look at manhood and they go, that doesn't look like much fun. I don't see too many happy men. I don't see them living lives they want to be living, and I don't want that for myself. The flip side of that is that they look at grown-up men who, in spite of what they see, are still carrying on some degree of responsibility. I'm doing this in my head because of various degrees. And the boys go, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know how I'll be able to do that. I would tell you stories, but we only got a little bit of time. That piece of it is really powerful for the boys. The second piece of this I want you to know about is they are even more afraid of having more emotional power than grown-ups. And what I mean by emotional power is actually very simple, where the boy can behave in some way and get a reaction from the adult, which means it's just about everything. Because as I said earlier, the boys have learned pretty much everything there is to know about the adults in their lives. I don't mean everything about their history. I mean that they have fenced their way into who they are and their personalities, and they especially know how to touch their buttons, which I'll come to in a minute. And the same thing is true with teachers and other people in their lives, because the boys inadvertently study these people because they're around them and they're in relationship. And the reason they're afraid of having more emotional power than the grown-ups is when the grown-ups lose it one way, shape, or form or another. The boy watches, and especially when the grown-up is behaving in a way that they explicitly have told the boy, do not behave like. And I can tell you all know stories like that. And I had hundreds of them. I have recordings of boys talking. The boy goes, great. They're not acting any more maturely than I am. And if that's the last bus stop, we are all in deep trouble because the boy deep inside wants to grow, mature, and become the man he was born to become. So that's boarding piece. So they need their parents, they need adults, they need grown-ups badly, even though they will most of the time voice, I'm such and such age, I don't need you, I can make my own decisions, I'm going to do what I want to do, etc. That's just, they need adults. What they need is very different than what they needed when they were little boys. Very different. They crave meaningful responsibility and challenge. They crave challenge and responsibility that's real and meaningful to them. So I'm not necessarily talking about getting chores done, picking up their clothes, putting things away, doing schoolwork. Not that all those things aren't important to the adult. It's that, again, the boys, as I voiced earlier, have a lot more intelligence and skill and capabilities, and they're ready to use it. And inside of them, which will largely go unspoken most of the time, they have imaginations and dreams of what they'd like to be doing. And given the opportunity to sink their teeth and their hands and their feet and their being into a challenge and a responsibility that's real and meaningful to them, they will become fully online, present, powerful, effective, good, because they're engaged in what's actually real for them at that time. So they're also agents of change, which is a very surprising phrase for most grown-ups, because they look at boys in most circumstances and they don't want to change at all. They don't want to change their clothes. They don't change their style. They don't want to change their behavior. And here's how it works for the boys. Describe being bored, describe being afraid, and describe needing adults to be different than in relationship to them than they were when they were little boys, and craving challenge and responsibility that's real and meaningful to that. When that's not going on, and they being the boys are able to continue to behave in the ways they're behaving and getting the expected result from the adult, then you've got friction and trouble. And what the boy will do is ramp it up. And the trouble can be, again, overt, covert, or some combination between the two. And he will ramp it up because boys, again, in most circumstances, and I'm not talking about a BTM group, I'm talking about in day-to-day life with most of the people in their lives, they're not going to tell you what's going on. Half the time, they don't know what's going on themselves. You ask them, well, what do you feel about? I don't know. It takes a certain context for that to become safe and real and meaningful for a boy. So he's going to ramp it up. And what he's doing through his beingness, through his behavior, is he's communicating non-verbally, this isn't working. Realize this isn't working and make a shift here so that this can work better. Because he's not going to walk up and say, mom, dad, teacher, counselor, minister, priest, the way you're doing things isn't working very well. We got to make it different, because then he's the adult taking the lead. And that's not going to work. That's not going to work for a lot of reasons. Boys love buttons. They love buttons, whether it's the buttons on their phone, on a little PlayStation thing, on a television, doesn't matter. And their favorite buttons are the buttons, got them on my Boys to Men shirt, the buttons in adults that they know are there that they can push, and they're going to get a react. They're going to get a response. And they do it for two reasons that are really important. One is because they can, because it works like pretty close to every time. And when that happens, the boy feels strong. Oh, I neglected to tell you. I basically describe boys in two words. I think you've heard this from me at some point. Play and strength. All boys want to play, and all boys want to be strong. I don't care how old they are. The reality is play and strength, those two dynamic forces in boys are meant to develop over time into greater meaningfulness, purposefulness, and beauty for the boy into his young manhood and into manhood, and for the greater good of the world, because the soul of a boy, the soul of all people, is inextricably bound in the soul of the world. We're here for reasons. So they push the buttons because they can, and they get a sense of charge. They get a sense of power and strength. They also do it because they're trying to get a change to take place, as I just said. So that everything for a boy is a game. Since everything is play, then everything is a game. And then little boy's world, which is the basic sort of elementary level, in the little boy, the young boy's world, every game is a win-lose game. Every game is a win-lose game. The difference for a little boy, most of the time, is that when he loses the game, he might get pissed off about it, but he's ready to start another game. He just goes on and starts again. Whereas, and the boys will play win-lose games until it doesn't work anymore. Meaning that if he's not confronted with, or he's not faced with a crisis in his life where what he's doing doesn't work, meaning where win-lose games doesn't work, he will continue to do it for his whole life. Actually, we see lots and lots of examples of that. So everything is a game for the boy, and everything is a game for the youth, except he's ready by time he's 12, 13, or 14 years old to move to the next stage of development. Now, really quickly, let me tell you, one of the ways I've worked with this for many years very effectively, because boys are basically living through their bodies, is to do it physically, which is where being a black belt in Aikido is extremely useful, because boys like to fight. So I'll say, come on, let's fight. Do various different things. And the minute I do something with Aikido where the boy is neutralized without there being any kind of destructiveness to him, he wants to know how I did it. And the how becomes an activity of relating that awakens in him his desire to be able to do that. And it's not just physical way of being, it's a metaphor for how to be in life and to move from one stage of what power is to the next stage of what power is. And one stage of what conflict is to the next stage of what conflict is. And frankly, from one stage of what love is to the next stage to what love is. So that's everything is a game. And the last thing that's really important to know, which I call this area the knowledge of the beast, because for years I've used kind of the metaphor teenage boys as being like dragons that came from Peace in the Heart. I'll tell you about it maybe later because time's important. And this last little item is a teenage boy will avoid losing at all costs. Here we go. And for years, I wondered about this until it became very clear to me that in any kind of conflict, if he has to back down, he may back down to save face or to save consequences, which he decides are the lesser of two evils. When I say he will avoid losing, he will come back for revenge one way or another. I can tell you stories of my own growing up, and I'm not a young man anymore. So this goes back a long time. He will avoid losing at all costs. I'll do. Any question? Okay, so now
A question, but I want you got plenty of time. You got like 35 minutes. So don't sell us short, dude.
all right,
All right.
catch my breath. So this is knowledge of the beast. This is, and I'm a Detroiter. Detroit is a very diverse city. And I've worked all over what's called the Tri-County area, which are the three counties that Detroit is either in or surrounding Detroit. I'm a native. I've been here my whole life. In every community I've walked into, regardless of economics, sociology, ethnicity, religion, skin color, doesn't matter. These things have all shown up. So what I want to focus on now is power conflict involved. Because for boys, everything is about power. Everything's about being strong. And when the boy doesn't get past the fundamental level of power, which is what you'll find in a dictionary definition, where power is defined and believed to be and embodied in us, is the ability to control or dominate another person, other people, place, or event, or all of the above. That's power. So, Joe, if you and I are messing around, we're wrestling and you're on top of me, you have power and I don't. You're strong and I ain't. And as boys, that's how we play. It's lots of fun, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's fine when you're playing around as a little boy. When you move beyond that, it really doesn't work well in anything other than specific kinds of games like athletics. It doesn't work well in personal relationships because so now I'm weak and I'm losing. I'm not laughing. What I want to do is I want to flip it. So now I'm on top of you and you're down there and I'm up here. So now I'm powerful and I'm strong and you're weak and you're losing. And man, how's that going to feel, Joe? Right? God, that's where this is basic in terms of the neuropsychology and the biology. This is your reptilian nervous system, nervous embodiment. And conflict, again, the dictionary definition is a contest between two or more people with a winner and a loser. And I don't know, in my boys, so I don't like to lose. I met too many boys that do like to lose. You know, all kinds of stuff going on in the political realm about winning and losing right now. And again, that doesn't function well. It does in human relationships. It does not function well. Particularly the more intimate the relationships, the worse it functions. Love is generally understood to be warmth, care, and affection for another person, people, groups, places, events, memories, and so forth and so on. Which is fine. I don't have any beef with that definition. It just happens to be the case that in the face of anger and conflict and control battle, something as simple as take the garbage out. I'll do it in a minute as a starting off point. Love, in terms of warmth, affection, and caring, vanishes. And what boys are hungry for, and they're actually developmentally born with these capacities. It's not like they have to be taught like they're as a blank slate, like as a tabula rasa. It's in every human being for a sense of power where it's not about controlling the other person. Let me say this about that. The reason that's so weak, this shows up in martial arts a lot. The reason that's so weak is the boy can never stop being afraid. He can never stop being afraid, which he will feel as weakness, because he'll always be afraid that someone else is going to beat him. Someone else, another guy is going to be stronger than him. Just for all you guys who are out there on the other end of the screen, think about anytime you walk into a setting with a group of men. How about you? But even at my age, I'm walking in as much comfort as I've developed. There's still a sense of sizing the other guys up. Where do I stand in relationship to them? You can never stop being afraid in that paradigm, that embodied sense of power is about controlling other people. Because you're never going to know whether there's someone right there in the room with you, if not many, who are more powerful than you are. What they're ready for is a sense of power. It's not about controlling somebody else. It's about being able, I don't like the word control very much, but manage, execute, to become strong within yourself, in your capacity, in your abilities to handle your own feelings, your own impulses, your own, my own tenderness. And that's not about repressing, which is the old conventional Marlboro Man, solitary guy kind of thing, no feeling stuff. The man bot, which begins with the boy code. Not about that at all. In almost 40 years of working with boys, over and over again, showing the power of feeling, the power of what the boy senses, the power, because, again, not to control the people, but for him to feel his fullness, and especially their sensitivity, especially the really high level of sensitivity that boys have that is generally misunderstood by people, because they think of sensitivity in what we usually refer to as the feminine mode of emoting in a visible verbal way. And boys can do that, but boys are very capable of walking into any setting. And when I say feeling, I'm not talking about emotion. Sense what's going on in the room and sense the other people, and have bodily sense going on with him that are telling him, directing him what he should or should not be doing. Not in a good way, but what's safe and what's not safe.
And we got some questions loading up. So you like we want to start taking them in a couple of minutes. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. So I'm going to move through the power, conflict, and love thing, and then open it up for questions, because the questions will always get to the concept. So where power is about cultivating its capacities to manage himself, where conflict is when two or more forces come together, creating the opportunity for something new and different to happen. This is pure evolution. Right? And where love, a creative force in the world, which is actually what love is a creative force in the world. And the movement for boys, as I've learned with them, from them, is they will stay with power is about me and control and domination, and control is about my winning and losing. And they'll stay with that until that doesn't work. And it stops working when adults in their life, when the adults themselves don't play win-lose games anymore. Win-lose games that the boy can see that he's winning, because half the time the adults can't even see it. They misread it because when winning and losing doesn't work anymore, and when win is what the adult is playing, the boys wake up to it like that. And they start moving into it very quickly. And all kinds of capacities that are there, soul capacities, in terms of beginning to get an inner sense of what we would call as men purpose. It really shows up as a dream for the boy in like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, blah, 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 blah. Boys will move into their young manhood actually very rapidly. And I love Boys to Men. I've been attached to it for almost since the beginning. And Boys to Men and other kinds of work are testimonies to what I'm talking about in terms of the boys stepping into it when the relationships and the context and are the kind that I'm talking about. And again, the area that has been most favorable to me that I've learned the most about has to do with power conflict and law. Okay, let's take questions. Go ahead, Joe.
Right on. Thanks, Ted.
Yep.
Okay, Steve Anderson. I'm not good at this. I got to unmute Steve. Hang on. Let me see if I can do it.
So, Joe, I'm sending you the list that in the order they came in. Go complete. You can call him Daryl.
Daryl.
Okay, I have Steve as top of the list for me, but go ahead, Daryl. You want to handle it?
Hey, thanks, Ted. Wow. I think you took me back to age 17 when I watched my first Kung Fu movie. And I thought if I learned to be as bad as Bruce Lee, nobody would ever mess with me.
Right.
And I had the fortune of having family members who were all martial arts practitioners. I went from wanting to injure people because I figured that's mastery of the skill, to be repeatedly taught to learn to control the amount of energy. And the intention was always to redirect the energy, not harm the person. The aha moment for me was when someone was trying to strike me in anger and I did not want to embarrass my Sifu. I kept redirecting the energy, and the more I did it, the more confused my opponent looked. And then there's a moment where I think they saw me not as an enemy. To me, that's the greatest expression of what I've heard you say in this talk. Question that comes to mind is, and I asked this last night, and you're taking me all the way back to George Foreman. How do you incorporate the family's other values in this evolution of mentor to mentee? Where is that line? Because I want to just go in and push, and I want to make a model of me, oh Jedi Jr.
Yes. Right. Well, it's a really big question, Daryl. So let me see if I can give a small answer to a big question. Because in Jamie's session, just for me, which I came in at the tail end, I heard comments about listening to the boys, listening to the youth. So the way the boys have taught me to do that is basically learn to shut up. Not for them to shut up, but for me to shut up. For me to listen to them and if it isn't answering the question you're asking, I'm misunderstanding it, just interrupt me, okay? But to listen to them so that they're giving me the clue is where they want to go so I can walk there with them in the manner that we're talking about. That's one answer. I want you to know that you talked about family and family values. When we're talking about martial arts and punching and kicking and striking and all those kinds of things, it's happening in families. What's happening to a much greater extent is the conflicts are very simple and very subtle, at least in the boys' world. In the boys' world, you can ask him, like the question was, take the garbage out. And the boy says, I'll do it in a minute. Now, that might just sound like a typical exchange between a parent and the boy. In the boy's world, that's the game. He knows he's going to get asked that question or some question like that. And he already knows what he's going to say back. And he knows what the adult's going to say to him after he says, I'll do it in a minute, because they've been through it, how many hundreds of times. I've had many boys, we sit down together, take a piece of paper, because I say it like a board game. I first said it to a boy. I said, this is like playing a video game. And they said, well, how do you keep, of course, bear with me for a Joe, because this is about the family stuff. Because the adults don't see that they're in this win-lose game, and the boy is in it, and he's taking them down, okay? He's taking them out. The boy is sitting there playing with his Game Boy. This is it was 30 years ago. And I said, well, how do you keep score? He said, depends. He said, boys want to talk, depends. And I said, depends on what? He says, some days I keep score by how fast, and some days by how much. What he meant, he was talking about his mom, was how fast she got mad And some days by how mad she got, how intensely she got mad, and some days by both. So in terms of the family value, this is learning as the adult to do it differently. And I've got to say it that broadly right now because it will take me too much time and we won't be able to get to more questions. So to do it differently so that the win-lose game the boy's in does not work. And he's awakened and drawn to what you described with sparring by redirecting the energy. And so your opponent, in this case, the boy, is confused because when the boy's met with something different than the tug of war or the push-pull, okay? When he's met with something like he pushes and you do this, or he pushes and you step back, or he pushes and you go behind, or he pushes and you're not in the same place anymore, he gets confused because he's used to the pattern being exactly what it is. That's his security. That's his familiarity. That's how he feels strong because he feels he's controlling you. And when he can't do it, he goes, pardon me. Oh, shit. Okay. That a fair enough start for the answer, Darren?
Yeah. We're getting to move along. So thank you, Ted. All right. So next we have Joseph Losi has a question.
Okay, Ted.
Yeah.
All right. I'm nominating you for president in 2024.
I just had a friend last night ask me about running, and I said no.
Holy shit.
Too arrogant for that.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Thank you, though.
I live in your world. I'm a psychologist. Okay. I don't work with teens. I work with adults. But I'm really fascinated by this notion of where the thirst for power, which translates sometimes to me, and this is a loaded word, for dominance, is it actually just a straight up biological drive, or is it both biologically and socially shaped? And then the second question, I'm going to have to let this go because I have a client waiting and I wish I didn't. When boys are losing, what are they losing?
Okay. So let me give you a quick answer. This nature, nurture, nature or culture, to me, I don't mean this as an insult. I just want to tell you, it's a both. It's always been both. There is absolutely a biological piece to it. We have they call the brain the triune brain, and it's part of who we are. But it's part of who we are, and simultaneously, there's the cultural formulations and support for the forms and shapes it takes, and we are also biologically designed to go beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, sometimes I'd be working with a group of boys, and it would be, tell me who's strong. They tell me, and I say, well, I can tell you about a man who brought the most powerful empire in the world at the time to its knees without a single punch.
Mm.
The ability to be what's referred to as nonviolent requires an enormous set of capacity, which we all are born with. So let's see, what was the second part of your question, Jeff?
When we lose, when a boy is
What are the boys losing? Okay, they're losing they're losing their sense of themselves.
Absolutely.
That's what I mean. At a fundamental level, they're losing whatever they understand their sense of themselves to be. But again, the younger the boy, my granddaughter is 3 years old. She's in preschool. I watch boys playing all the time, and they're falling down and another. Losing is not a big deal.
No.
Because they're in the world of imaginative play, and they're just born right into the game again. When you get to be the teenage boy, okay, the youth, losing is a bigger deal because what the boy is meant to be doing at that point is learning how to stand on his own 2 feet, stand up for himself, speak up, say what he's got to say. And the grown-ups don't like it because he's back in the win-lose game. He's trying to get a change, blah, 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 blah. But when he loses that way, then that's a big deal.
Yeah, but
it's why avoid losing at all costs, because developmentally at 12, 13, 14, look, why were rites of passages taking place in post and pre-industrial with 12-year-olds? Why is it a bar mitzvah? Is it 13 years old? That's not a mistake. That's because at that point, developmentally, we're actually ready to become young adults, but we're living in a culture that doesn't allow it to happen. And so the boy doesn't want to lose. He wants to stand up for
The win at all costs, isn't that a socially shaped drive? Be a man up, don't,
get it again. You cannot, it is not, we cannot do a reductionist mechanism thing about it because we're human beings living in a world and a culture. So to me, to try to pull apart, is it this or is that? We can do that. It makes for an interesting discussion. The reality is it's all of the above.
yeah.
And the reality is that each particular situation, each particular person and relationship, it will have those particularities that fit for them.
Thank you, brother. I got to jump.
Have a good client. If you want me, you'll know where to find me. I'd be glad to continue the conversation.
All right. Well, it's T. Greg Squires is next.
Ted, thanks so much, man. I love hearing you break this down. It's so refreshing, and it just echoes everything I get from those boys too, and how much I advocate for them. And I wanted to just so many things you dropped into, but just that trying to get changed, that's the win for them. And so that when we do that thing different, that they go, wait, what was that? That's a win for them. That's an ultimate win for them because that's really what they're pushing for. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. So I want to look, and I love the power, conflict, love thing. That was beautifully, I think it's such a great expression for men or for the masculine of the dynamic that's playing out in us. What I find, so on our rites of passage adventure, and this goes back to kind of man box thinking of physical challenges. That's what boys are. That's where power is. So I want to see what your take is on, because what I would like to see on our processes that happen on the weekend, because what you're talking about is the gift of Tedness that you talked about. We want to get the T. Gregness, the Tedness, the Jonas, or whatever.
Yep.
So it's not, we tend to kind of always think physical for boys, but I want to develop processes like, who's the best friend here? Who's the smartest? Giving a challenge that allows those strengths to come out so that the other boys can go, oh, that's the gift that Josh brings. That's the gift that Joe brings. That's the gift that Gary brings, because some of them are great comics. Some of them are great. Some of them are better at these things. It's not always physical. So can you talk about power in that shape?
Yeah. So that's wonderful. That speaks directly to when Joe did the introduction, to become the man he was born to become. That speaks to an aspect that I haven't given much voice to today, which is the soul qualities in each boy that he's brought into the world with him and his gifts that he's meant to give to the world. So, and there are lots of ways to do it. You just described one. I'll tell you a quick story. A number of years ago, I worked with about 70 middle school boys, actually combined from 2 Catholic schools. And I did a bunch of power, conflict, and love things, and a little bit of Aikido stuff. And then after our break in the afternoon, I used painter's blue tape, and I made a big square. And I went through Moore and Gillette power, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Okay, and each part of the square, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, said a few things about it. Had the boys all move and sit where they felt they fit the most. Well, just about everybody sat in the warrior section, or the king section, no surprise, right? The lover section and the magicians were almost in, and they got a chance to talk about that. And I said, okay, that's great. Now, where else might you go? And then they all started moving. And some of my favorite things were my favorite things were how the boys who were in one place moved to the other places and started talking about what we might call the private, hidden, secretive, if you will, parts of them, like how the boy who was a big football player, he's secretly writing poetry, right? And now he's telling me, at that point, there was like 35 or 40 boys in the room. A whole bunch of them were strangers. The rest of them were his classmates, schoolmates, that he's writing poetry, or this one likes drama, or this one paints, and all I did was sit there and shut up because it was happening, right? Another way into this, which I've done with boys, is I ask them, or I invite them to talk about, when you're bored, what are you dreaming of doing? What are you dreaming? Because I know you're dreaming about stuff. And they'll start talking when they feel a couple things safe, and when they're going to be taken seriously. Because most grown-ups don't take the boys seriously. You know, they're going to have some wise ass or critical comment to make. And when they don't do that, when they bless them, when they validate them, even if they just jump up and go, okay, and pay attention, that's feeding gold, and the gold will come out of the boys. So there's some ideas.
Awesome, man. Roxas, man.
Hey, I feel really bad because Steve Anderson, please forgive me, but are you unmuted? Yes, you.
Yeah.
Okay. So Steve's going to be our last question, Ted. God bless. Thanks for being here. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Ted. This is awesome. My question is for the boy who is video games, books, they're enough. I'm fine, to help them discover what's important to them or help them express it. I think you touched on it with the what are you dreaming about, but other ideas to help a boy find what's meaningful or express it.
And you're referring to the boys who are doing video games and reading books. Did I get that right, Steve?
Yeah, and saying that's enough, that's fine, I'm good. So there's not a trying to get them what's meaningful, what do you want to do? And I'm like,
Let me come at it 2 different ways. First of all, let me say this for everybody. The instant you're even feeling in your body, I'm going to try to get him to do something, you're stunk. Because the boy's going to feel, even if he's not conscious, which is not important, he's bodily going to get it, that you're trying to get him to do something, and he's going to go like this. Not outwardly, but he's going to feel it, and he's going to resist it. I can show you this physically some other time. He's going to resist it because he's going to feel that force of trying to. You want to let that go. You want to always shift. I'm trying to get him to do something to I'm trying to have me be a certain way. I want me to be this way because that's going to open up this possibility for this to happen. Right? So here's what I found with boys with video games and reading is I ask, especially because I don't ever play video games, I'm not the least favorite, is I ask them to tell me about the game because they live in that world. That's their imaginative world. It's really meaningful, really important. And it's like what Michael Mead says about stories, that your place in the story, you're identifying with something in the story, some character, and that's ringing your bell. Right? And the boy, whatever the game is, he'll start explaining it. You will see animation, and you get involved in that with him, and you get excited about it with him, and you want to know more about it with him, and what does it mean to him, and so on. And he will just keep up, and that building of the connectedness between the two will lead to more things. For example, I did that with a boy, and so he one day said to me, well, I want to have a girlfriend. He was 13. Of course, he wants to have a girlfriend. And he said, but nobody pays attention to me at school. Well, he's playing all these role-playing games, and he's always playing some kind of magician archetype, the magi. And I said, well, what are those qualities? And he tells me all about the qualities, and I would wonder how they would work at school. He comes back a week or 2 later and starts talking about how he's kind of doing some of these magic things real quietly because he doesn't want people laughing at him. And a week after it comes back and tells about this girl that's paying attention to him. Okay? That's some idea you can play with.
All right.
Y'all, thank you. You want more? Joe knows where to find me.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Ted Braude. God bless you, man. Thank you so much. Ted's book, How Boys Become Men, Transforming Dragon Spirit into Courageous Hearts. Ted, we've been working on getting you to this thing for 5 years, and here we are, and here you are, and I don't know what we were depriving ourselves from, but I'm so grateful you're here tonight, and have a great holiday season.
May you all be well and be safe. Thank you very much. I love it.